Hi everyone, welcome back to another video testing new brushes in Krita. This is another brush from the Rakurri brush pack that I mentioned in my last brush testing video, which I've again linked in the description. The brush I'm trying out today is called Confetti, and I'll be testing it out by doing a study of one of those aesthetic tea drinks that probably taste awful. Like in the last video, I'm challenging myself to do the entire study with just a single brush, because in theory, if my underlying art principles are sound, then the type of brush I use shouldn't really make a difference to whether the overall piece looks good or not. Obviously, in my normal paintings, I'll continue to use different brushes depending on what I'm trying to achieve, like the airbrush, hard brushes, etc. But this is just a fun little challenge for myself. Spoiler alert, but I wasn't actually 100% happy with the final result, so I thought I'd also take the opportunity to try out Krita's pixelart filter, which I found a while ago but never found a reason to use. I've seen other people do art of these aesthetic drinks and I thought they looked so appealing and cute, so I really wanted to do one myself. I'm not sure who took the photo of the original reference because there's loads of the same photo floating around online and I couldn't find anything when I was looking, so if anyone knows who took the original photo, please do let me know and I can add the credit for it. Anyway, whilst I decided I wasn't going to work entirely on one layer, I still wanted to limit how many I used, so I mostly tried to stick to one for the background and one for the drink. Not for any real reason, I just thought it would be kind of fun to do and that by limiting myself, I'd be forcing myself to push my skills more. I picked this brush specifically because I saw that the brush marks actually change colour slightly from the base colour, i.e. I picked an orange and the brush produced marks with slightly different shades of that orange, and I thought that was really cool. It's also a splatter type brush, meaning it's kind of the opposite to the type of brush that I normally use, which makes this more fun because I get to try something I'd never really use in my normal art. So right off the bat, I'm gonna say that this brush was a bit hard to control, especially with edges, but since the brush is literally called Confetti, that is unsurprising. I started off by blocking out some key shapes and colours, but since it's a splatter type brush, it was a bit harder to separate stuff like the cup from the plate or the background. Not impossible of course, just that it took a bit longer and had a less clean finish, which is fine if you're going for a more messy look. I got around this by zooming in a lot or using a very small brush size, which helped make more defined edges where I wanted them, and of course in areas where I wanted soft or lost edges, it flowed in nicely so I didn't have to spend loads of time blending. I ended up redoing the background entirely with a larger brush size to make the teacup stand out more from it, as I was using a smaller size brush for the teacup, which created fuzzier edges, whereas the larger size for the background had a more abstract look, which I thought was cool, and it made it very obvious where the teacup started, especially with the colour and the value contrast as well. I struggled a little with the flowers because I wanted to create a lot of contrast between them and the tea, which I was doing using colour, but I also wanted to create some edge contrast as well, and whilst I was compensating with a smaller brush size, it didn't 100% come out the way I wanted it to, and I probably could have achieved it easier with a different brush. Like, it definitely still ended up looking a little bit muddy. I was quite pleased that I still managed to achieve a shiny look for the actual teacup, which just goes to show that regardless of the type of brush you use, it's actually the core principles which make a painting good. I've always felt that brushes are great for making your life easier and achieving effects and textures faster, but they're more like icing on a delicious cake. If the cake underneath sucks, then no amount of icing is going to save it. Since I've developed my art skills more, I feel like it's been easier for me to play around with brushes because I have a better idea of what I'm trying to achieve, so it's easier for me to figure out the right tools for the job. This was a fun brush to try out, especially with the fact the colour changes within the brush from the primary colour you picked, though I'm not 100% sure I'll use it again regularly. I think now that I have a better idea of what it does and how to use it, I can identify specific situations that would be really good for me to use it in. I quite liked how quickly it created variation in the colour of the tea. That was visually interesting, but I think the flowers would have come out better with a smaller, harder brush, so they stood out more, especially as they're kind of the focal point of the image. Basically, it's probably not the brush to use for fine details. I think the texture could be quite nice to use for landscapes, but we shall see. It's probably not a brush I'll use super often, but I'm not going to rule it out entirely. Close up, I think the texture of this painting isn't what I'd normally go for, especially with the fuzzier edges, and I could have achieved a more accurate study with a different brush, but the overall image still reads pretty well and the values / colours look nice from the overview thumbnail. Rather than going over it with a different brush though, I thought it would be the perfect time to try out the pixelart filter in Krita, which which I've been wanting to try for ages but never had a reason to, especially since the final image, though I did still like it, was looking kind of fuzzy, and I think a pixelated look would cover that well. You basically just go to filter, artistic, and select pixelize, and then choose the size of the pixels that you want. Honestly, I couldn't decide which version I preferred, the original, the smaller pixelize, or the larger pixelize, so let me know in the comments if there's a version you prefer, because I have such a hard time deciding these things sometimes. And yeah, I know it's cheating and obviously not real pixel art and stuff, but it still looks cute, okay? One of my 2026 goals is to actually try and make some cute pixel art properly, so we'll see when I get around to doing that. Honestly, I'm having a lot of fun trying out these random brushes in these low-stakes studies, and I would highly recommend giving it a go yourself. It's quite freeing to not have to worry about which brush you're going to use because you're using the same one, trying out that brush and seeing what happens with it. But yeah, thanks for watching.